So I'm just going to start from where I am because that's the easiest way. There's a whole backstory to all of this, obviously, and that will be revealed in more detail as these sessions go on, as these webisodes, if you will, continue. Currently in the United States and working two separate 12-step programs. As some of the viewers will be aware, AA is quite the spiritual boot camp. It is 12-step boot camp. There's this expression in many of the other fellowships that they love AAs because AAs have been put through the rigors of the big book and 12-step AA recovery work so intensely that they tend to excel and take very seriously any other 12-step program. So fortunately I got my start in AA, and AA then ultimately introduced me to ACA. Those are the two programs that I am and have been involved in. Having worked the 12 steps in AA with multiple sponsors over the years, multiple times, I have had a spiritual awakening, have been relieved of the obsession for alcohol, and have become a recovered alcoholic. That means recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. The obsession is gone. The allergy is never triggered because I don't drink. So that the problem has been solved. And that's great news. That is a miracle. My life's been recreated many times over. Ultimately, I was running into a brick wall in AA. Fourth steps, house cleanings, semi-annual house cleanings, 10th step spot checks, the nightly inventories, work with sponsor. It just wasn't getting at the main core issue. So I ultimately, through a chain of events, I was ultimately exposed to another program called Adult Children of Alcoholics, ACA. And by reading the BRB, also known as the Big Red Book, in that program, in that fellowship, I began to find a new home, and I began to find that the real causes and conditions of my drinking in the first place were family of origin. And those are the things that wound up pushing me to even consider alcohol in the first place. So I was unable to properly, or I shall say efficiently or effectively, address those in AA. They were never really rooted out, even with a good sponsor. AA does not let you sort of hurt, or if you will, feel. They always say in AA, it's not into feelings, it's into action. And with an ACA, an adult child, who's always, their feelings were never validated as children, which is extremely toxic for any child. I finally had the liberty, the privilege, the sort of permission, if you will, to actually feel and to not have to justify my feelings anymore. I could feel how I wanted to feel, how I was feeling, without having to, not feel that because somebody says you shouldn't feel that way. And I needed that, and so in ACA I started to find the new home and the ability to feel my feelings without having to justify them to anyone. I would make a disclaimer here. I am juggling these two programs And I would definitely not recommend by any means for someone who's new to recovery to try to do ACA. Whether you're an NA, CA, AA, any of those programs that are life and death, regarding substances, it's just prime ground for relapse. So 2 years or less, no, it's more of a liability. So stay away, stay away. Of course, seek your sponsor's final approval. This is just through my experience, and what I went through at nearly 6 years sober, being exposed to ACA, and it nearly folding me in half. Just to be quite honest. So, the fact that there are two programs to juggle can be overwhelming. So I think it is imperative for the individual to choose a good steady standby, and in the end, AA or NA or AA or CA, whichever one of those a person feels more comfortable with, because ultimately, in the end, the person must stay sober. So if you choose the program that is, based on the most basic aspect of all, which is physical sobriety, well, that's AA. So using AA as sort of my foundation is really probably the safest bet. And ACA is the one that is going to address the actual causes and conditions for the drinking in the first place. What created the neurosis? Well, the neurosis was born in the family of origin trauma. That's where the neurosis was born. And then once that neurosis took effect and the alcohol was introduced, then you have a full-blown problem, alcohol dependence, alcoholism, and everything that comes from that, stems from that. So you're dealing with multiple issues, and dealing with those one program at a time. Some may do AA for a period of time and then may switch to ACA and go back and forth. That happens as well. Some people do them simultaneously. Maybe they go to a few AA meetings a week, a few ACA meetings a week, read a little of the Big Red Book, some of the AA Big Book, alternate between steps, whatever it takes. The ultimate goal is progress. The ultimate goal is healing. For me, anyway, my goal is to be a better person tomorrow than I was today. Progress, not perfection. And all those mottos and apropos that are, keep it simple, one day at a time, etc., first things first. The things in the book. And, that's one. So that's one part to sort of be looking at is, which of these, if you are going to be dealing, and a lot of AAs will probably wind up finding that AA alone, a spiritual kindergarten, and AA is a spiritual kindergarten, and ACA is kind of like the PhD of 12-step. Some may say it's Coda, some may say it's Al-Anon, but ACA is some serious shit. It is extremely serious and very intense. So, having two of those going on simultaneously, that is where I am now. and also currently. So this, really this is about working multiple 12-step programs while being in the United States and starting over in the United States after having lived abroad. The recovery that I experienced did not take place in the United States. It took place in the People's Republic of China, because that is where I worked for years as a teacher, and that is where I got sober. I was not introduced to ACA until I re-entered the United States last year, and that is where my exposure to ACA began. And that is really where a lot of things changed for me, in good ways, and some, I feel, at least now, because I'm still new to it, slightly detrimental ways. And I know that's just growing pains, because it is a very painful program. But a lot of things worth doing may be painful at first. Facing the family of origin, especially if there was abuse there, is quite a daunting task. But it is necessary if true healing is to commence. So, on top of being back in the United States after years of being abroad, there is a reverse culture shock. There is also a new job, so there's new employment to deal with, and I'm switching careers. So we have multiple now. If I was in first year sobriety, they say no major decisions, life choices, or whatnot. That's not the case. So there are certain aspects that my sobriety sort of can stand up to, if you will, or withstand. But it's really a day at a time, and that's the thing that I must remember. Most importantly, is it's just ODAT, one day at a time. So there is the job. There is the re-entry, the repatriation process. There is the challenge of making new friends, of course. Going to face-to-face AA meetings is a really, really pretty quick, down, dirty, simple, rapid way of making some quick friends, at least those who can relate to what you're dealing with and who are not out to go get shit-faced drunk, in small-town Indiana or wherever you're from every night when there's a football game on, because some people want more of a life than that. So fortunately, there are enough AA meetings out there and people who are trying to stay sober and live a clean life. Not that there's anything wrong with drinking, because people can drink. But, for an alcoholic, a lot of us don't want to be around that anymore. Some of us do, and we still go out with friends. So, everybody's a little different. I personally, I don't enjoy being around that crowd. It never was me, even when I was drinking, and it's not me today. So, these are some choices for the individual, but making new friends, dealing with a new job, dealing with the American work environment, as opposed to that of China or Korea, where some of you guys may be located, or Japan, or other parts of the world where it may be a little bit easier to save, and kind of, easier jobs where you're just teaching. There will be some adjustments to be made. More about the dating scene, We'll talk about that another episode, but during this one, I'm recovering from a major sinusitis I had in Rome. I just got back from Rome, so I'm just back in the country a couple days now, maybe a day or two, and so still kind of adjusting to some things, a little jet lag. But I wanted this first episode to just be an introductory one. I'm not all clean shaven and haircut or anything. I'm on the bed. I'm just seeing my face. I'm just keeping it real here. I'm keeping it very simple. And we're going to start off with this topic of, what do you do when you're in recovery and you're re-entering your country of origin and you're having to start over, and you're dealing with multiple 12-step programs back in your homeland, and then you have a new job and things like that. So, how do you maintain your sanity, your emotional sobriety, and things like that? So the first thing first is choosing a default steady standby program that you're going to feel safe with. That's gonna be a good fallback. For me, AA in the end becomes the fallback. The people are always serious in AA. I've worked with ACAs. I had an ACA spawn. I'm on step 4 right now in ACA. It is very intense. Step 4, way more intense than AA step 4. And it is quite a challenge. I'm still not done yet. I'm doing it sponsorless, because the sponsor I did have in ACA, I'm not going to mention names, but if he ever sees this video, he knows who he is, and he dropped me halfway through step 2 because I didn't know at the time, but I was also dealing with some narcissistic abuse, and he didn't clearly point that out. He just labeled me an emotional vampire and dropped me ultimately. Okay, so that's going to be another thing we can discuss more about, NPD and covert narcissism, and the vulnerable narcissist and the grandiose narcissist. We can talk about those another time, because that does come into my story. ACA is just really a catch-all program for anybody who has some sort of family dysfunction, and it could be everything from sexual abuse to religious abuse to physical violence or shaming, guilt tripping. I mean, it's just an umbrella catch-all of all the garbage that many of us contended with as children, and those things still affect us today. So we can discuss. I'll go more into detail about the narcissism in another episode, but this introductory episode, we're just getting some initial introductory stuff going. So stay tuned. We're going to be wrapping this up here, but stay tuned. Be thinking about, if you are re-entering. Many of you will be trying to come back from Korea, Japan, the Czech Republic, wherever you are, Thailand. You'll be getting tired of it. You'll want to come home. Maybe you're from the UK. You're going back to England or somewhere, or maybe Scotland. You'll be going home, some of you. And when you do, and you're juggling multiple programs, you want to pick a good steady standby default. And then, however you feel appropriate, whether you alternate weeks or whatnot, confirm with your sponsor, in the end, consult with that person. And we'll have more next time. Okay? We'll see you guys later. Bye.